Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first ITF Youth Dockers Podcast. My name is Viri Gomez. I'm from ILWU Canada, and I'm also an ITF Youth representative from the Dockers sector. I will introduce you to Nick LORIDAN.
Thanks, Viri. Welcome. I'm Nick LORIDAN. I was a former teleclerk in the Port of Antwerp. I'm also a youth representative for the ITF Dockers section. I'm happy to join Viri here today. A few months ago, I started working for the union, for BTB Belgium, a dock workers union, and I'm very proud to be here a part of this podcast today. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Brian Skiffington. I am a third-generation longshore worker on the Port of Tacoma, Washington, and a proud member of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Local 23.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Like today, Brian is our very first guest for this podcast. I personally know him from being part of the ILWU. I met him personally on my first very young workers conference. And I know he's a very active trade unionist. And it's really a pleasure to have him here because, like he said before we started this, he can have a conversation and keep going, you know? And the topic for our first podcast is going to be COVID because, you know, like it's now the new normal to live with COVID. So I feel like this is a very important topic to start with as it has affected the last 2 years of our lives personally and professionally on our workplaces.
Yeah, so if I might join in, I also know Brian, and I'm gonna thank him again because Brian, you were one of the first who gave me, I think it was somewhere abroad, you gave me the book about how to organize within a union. And I pulled a lot of tricks out of it. So it's really nice to have you here, Brian. Thank you for joining us. And maybe you can give us a small sketch about at the moment, how are you living in the experience of COVID? Did it change a lot for you guys at the case side, at the ports? Are there a lot of new things happening at the moment, or how are you experiencing everything?
Well, I would say that COVID, as far as our union goes and as far as the workplace goes, is about the most antisocial thing that has ever happened in my lifetime. Our union almost immediately made changes in our workplace to keep us safe. We don't have coffee breaks anymore. We do that socially distanced. Our dispatch process out of our hiring hall has changed. We only go in small groups. A lot of our workers are dispatched over the phone now, which is changing kind of internal dynamics in the union and the way that we experience the hiring hall and union control of our dispatch. We've had a lot of, not so much in Tacoma, we've had a few people die in Tacoma, which is really unfortunate. Actually, a young worker who was a brand new casual died about 5 months ago.
That's terrible.
I know that LA Long Beach down in Southern California has really been hit hard by this. So our union has definitely felt it on the docks, and it has changed our entire work culture and union culture. And we kind of got to organize despite all of that. The way our union meetings have happened, we've met in a warehouse. I mean, in December last year, when it was like, I don't know, very, very cold out, windy and rainy, we were all huddled together, not huddled together, but socially distanced in just an open warehouse out on the docks so we could do our business as a union. So it's been very bizarre. That's just a little, I guess, kind of taste of what I've been dealing with. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think we also have had a lot of changes. For us, we didn't even come up with the idea to join in a big warehouse. For us, there were just there was a no-go for people to join in groups. So we had more than a year we didn't have meetings, which was quite terrible. On the other hand, we had people who had a lot of more contact on the quay sides, on the docks themselves, on terminals where they had conversations. And whereas shop stewards were at a more frequent base, so the shop stewards, it went more like it was old school. They went to the terminals themselves. They had a lot of discussion with the people over there, and we had to manage to row with the, how do you say these, are row with the things that we have. Yeah, it was something completely new. It wasn't easy. At the moment, we have the chance to meet up again, but we lost more than a year of work. So for the union work, it was quite terrible. At the moment, we're having a good balance, but it was a terrible period, especially because you didn't get the right information, and you had a lot of people who wanted to be informed by their union. But yeah, how do you explain this? The news that they got from their union, it was like water dripping very slow, and it took a lot of time to inform all the members. We had to send them emails, text messages on a massive scale with special services. So it was something completely new for us. Yeah, we had the same. How was it for you, Viri?
Well, as you guys know, I'm from a small port in northern BC. So when COVID first started and I went back to longshoring we do logs on the ships, my local took a lot of measures for safety, but it was very hard for us to keep our physical distance because of the type of job we do. We work on gangs of four on the water, so it was like really hard. But the employer gave us shields and why not? And then I had to travel to the south to work on a bigger port, and the job that they do was amazing. Like it was the safety measures that they implemented because of the safety committees. It was really like very impressive. As short notice, they're always trying to keep the health and safety first for our workers. And yeah, like their hiring hold, the dispatch hold was now over online, so you have to plug in for work online. Most of the jobs that we do are actually outdoors, so that's a very good thing for us, that we don't really have to be in contact with somebody. And yeah, they implemented off the mask. The breaks are also separated, or there are marked, like on the lunchrooms, they're marked, and there were some sections that they put outside so that you can be, on an open space instead of indoors. But like you said, at the beginning, the information was just like, we're all even scared to go to work, And I feel for me, the bigger scare was just like, well, I'm scared to go to work because I don't know much about COVID, but I feel like the biggest stress in my life was like, whoa, am I gonna get paid if I choose just not to go to work, Like I know a lot of people don't have sick leave pay. They don't have benefits when you get sick. So with COVID entering, it's like we already struggled before COVID about sick days and about if you don't get some kind of compensation when you do need to get home. And when COVID entered, it's like, if you're sick, you stay home, right? So there was a lot of worry for our financial,
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I was scared to die in the first periods when you had all the news coming. There was a lot of insecurity. You didn't know. I wasn't sure about anything because I don't have a medical degree. I was only trusting the scientists and the doctors who were coming on television and the policymakers. But in the first weeks, I thought I was gonna die every day when I went outside. I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna get this virus. I'm gonna give it to my parents, or even worse, to my grandfather, who is like, he's really old. He's in his 80s. He isn't completely like he's mentally going in a bad state. He doesn't remember everything as good as he did it once. And I was really scared to give it to my friends, my family, and I really thought I was gonna die. But how is it fixed for you, Brian? When people are being sick, for an example, do they have sick leave too? Is it paid? Because I heard for Viri there was a lot of insecurity, and they weren't sure financially if they're gonna be in a terrible situation when they were sick. How are things going at your port, for an example?
So, our union negotiated with our employers. We basically, like, if you or somebody in your family, your kids or whoever, have COVID, there is basically to encourage members to stay home and not come to work when you or somebody in your family is sick, there is like a COVID pay that you can get on. So it'd kind of be like getting unemployment benefits or something.
Yeah.
It's really, we're still doing this, but I feel like people have maybe are just so exhausted that they're not as on top of it or as willing to. We do contact tracing. So if somebody is sick, they call our officers, and the officers basically go back and find out every terminal and every job they worked at. And then they look at those workplaces and they say, okay, you were a supervisor, like a Marine clerk supervisor a week ago, you were sick, so you worked in an office with this person, this person, this person, and this person. And they have to notify all of those people. And folks are encouraged to go get tested for COVID. And if they are positive, there's a scenario where they can stay home and collect this COVID pay, which happens all the time. I mean, that has been happening a lot. We just had a big outbreak in a maintenance department where, there's probably 25 guys that work over there, and like half of them got COVID or something. So our officers have been run ragged, working overtime, trying to keep us safe, and specifically not create a scenario where like the state tries to intervene because there's an outbreak on the docks or something like that. But anyways, yes, there is something available to any member that gets sick or their family gets sick. They can take a couple weeks off, get healthy, take a negative test after whatever it is, 7 days or 14 days, and they come back to work.
With that saying, do they get paid when they get that leave?
Yeah, their time off is paid.
It's paid. So well, that's really good, Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I was afraid of that. Maybe the people were going through a bad situation financially, but that's good news to hear. We also have an increased unemployment benefit at the moment for people who couldn't get a lot of work, or for example, we had a period, it was only a very small period, that there was a smaller amount of work. So we had a higher unemployment benefit for those days. We still have it for the people at the moment. And the same thing that Skiff mentioned, we also had the contact tracing. It did work because I liked it. It gave a little bit more a feeling of being secure at work when you know that you're not working with people who are sick, even if it's not 100% fail-proof. They still manage to evade a lot of problems that way. And we also got a system. It's difficult for me to explain it in English, but it guaranteed parents who couldn't guarantee childcare or school care because there were schools and childcares closing down in Belgium, and people who had to write paperwork to show that they couldn't bring their children to school, they also got a day that was paid and that was given permission to stay at home. So I think that we had a little bit of luck. If you're looking at a lot of other countries, it isn't fixed that good.
Yeah,
definitely.
And other thing I wanted to ask you, Skip, how do you feel like COVID had tested the strength of the union? For example, in my local, we haven't had a physical meeting, like you said, like because now with the dispatch, you do it over the phone, you do it over online. But do you think we have become stronger, that we have found like other ways to keep this organizing and communication stronger? Because now we can't really do it, physically, and we kind of lost that of being one-on-one kind of type of deal. How has it affected you?
Well, so how has it affected the union or tested the union? I like the way you framed that in the first place. Obviously, on an individual level, it has tested our membership. I was reading some comments by a brother from a small port in maybe Oregon, who was talking about when COVID happened, there were travel restrictions or travel bans. Normally if we don't have work in our port, we can travel to a neighboring port and pick up any slack work there. Well, some folks are from tiny ports, and when they banned travel, for example, there's whole union locals who have just stayed at home and been collecting COVID pay. They can't actually go work anywhere. They can't leave their own local. So on an individual level, obviously the health risks, the economic impacts, but on a union level, you know, for example, we held the first ever ILWU convention over online platform this year. Mm-hmm. And sitting in on that was, you know, clunky and awkward. It was a lot of people learning how to navigate a Zoom-like setting for the first time. Delegates from up and down the coast, people from all different generations, you know, they had to do trainings on technology for folks. But we rose to the challenge. And as awkward and slow as a process as it was actually like an amazing thing to watch, because here's a union that's been doing a convention since 1937, throwing a giant curveball, and we found a way to organize around it and make it happen. So I would say we've been tested in the way that we do our business. Mm-hmm. When it originally hit, we stopped our meetings too for probably 6 months, where just our executive board met, socially distanced, and kind of the trustees, just to make sure things were handled. Mm-hmm. But the actual membership, I think out of the whole ILWU in the States, we were probably, to my knowledge, the only local that was able to get meetings going again. It's because we had this resource, which is a publicly owned warehouse out on a terminal, where we could meet. If we didn't have that, there's no way we could have done our business. So
yeah,
I don't know. Does that answer your question?
No,
or is there...
Yeah, for sure. And do you think like for me, I'm sometimes scared that that was amazing, that commission was held, like, because then it makes it more accessible for everybody else that maybe they don't have the means to travel, maybe they don't have, they could just join from the comfort of their home, like right now us, like you're in Washington, Nick is in Europe, and I'm here in Canada. So it makes it really easy for us to be connected, right? And it's great that we found a way to organize and keep the union strong and keep it running. What scares me is that we're gonna get too comfortable with this way, and then maybe avoid, the physical when we go back to the new normal.
I've never been a delegate to any of our conventions, but I did sit in on one about 3 years ago as a guest. And I don't think there's any risk of like our conventions and caucuses ever going digital, because so much of what makes those spaces important is when they're not actually in a session. It's when they're like, people can go caucus around a lunch table or at a bar afterwards, and people can go hammer out the issues, and locals get together and do their work in person. The ILWU is such a social creature, and I would imagine BTB is too, and ILWU Canada, like that's exactly how we do our work.
I was thinking exactly the same, Brian. It's in the informal parts, next to Congress, all the official parts are always very important, but the informal moments, for speaking from the perspective of my union, those are the strongest moments and the most important moments, because those are the moments when people really get together and share their stories with each other on an honest way, without being scared to talk in front of a big group. So I completely agree. I think it won't disappear, but I do see a change in what people are calling the hybrid meetings at the moment. I see it especially from the ETF and the ITF side, when you are having an international meeting at this moment, that there are certain people getting together, and you have other people who are joining in hybridly, in a hybrid way, from their own hometown, for example. We had this in Brussels for the ITF Youth Committee. We had people from Belgium and Germany joining in real life. And then you had people who were coming from all over the other parts of Europe digitally, because for some countries there still were travel restrictions, and from other people they weren't fully vaccinated yet, or they were a little bit scared to travel. So we are changing. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys, but to the hybrid system.
I don't know in terms of how our coast is meeting. I think small groups are still happening. So our international executive board, I think, is meeting in person. We did have a caucus that was in person, which is delegates from all the locals, but there were no guests allowed. It was a very small gathering, and everybody had to be checked like their temperature was checked in and out every single day. So, I mean, it was very kind of intense. The ITF is where I've seen the hybrid model. I've sat in a couple meetings now where I've seen what you're talking about. I don't know that we're doing that in the ILWU necessarily.
Yeah, so I pointed it out a little bit wrong, I think, Brian. I also think that locally it will stay the same, but that the hybrid might be something for the international trade union work. I think, I'm
One
not
of the
sure.
things, I mentioned this and Viri mentioned this also, where I am concerned, you know, a lot of our members went to phone dispatch during COVID. Viri mentioned they have to check in online. In the ILW, so much of our tradition and culture is like rooted in the actual process of going to a hiring hall, having a union dispatcher hand you your job. And in theoretically behind the scenes online, it's still a union dispatcher doing that. But so much of our culture is going down to the hall, hearing what the buzz is, hearing people getting coffee, playing cards, you know, waiting for dispatch to start. And that's when you actually get to see the union. Instead of a guy, you know, 200 feet up in a crane cab, you actually get to hang out with them at the hall for 30 minutes before the job starts, right? The people that it's just in like an important cultural hub. And that to me is what I would hate to lose. And I will fight tooth and nail if the members want the convenience of phone dispatch or online dispatch instead of that cultural hub, because our union isn't anything without our hiring hall. That's my truth. Like
you have to be vigilant for it, because I can give you a personal anecdote on this one. If they get used to the comfort, it can be really, really fast that they stay this way. I don't know if you know it, but until a few years ago, we had a hiring hall in Belgium. We still have it in the other ports. We had one in Antwerp, but we got a conviction from the European Union. We had some really powerful business people in Belgium, in Europe too, and some politicians who sued us, who sued all the system that we have as Belgian port workers. And one of the things that we had a few years ago was it wasn't even a choice. We had to digitalize. And in the crossing phase of the digitalization, where the hiring went digital, which isn't by phone, but it is on we still have the pool system, but we have a digital hiring hall. So it is as you go to the hiring hall, but you log in on an iPad. Every dock worker got a free iPad with Wi-Fi connection. And then you have this digital environment where you also have the people doing the hiring. You have the union who can do the checking of everything live. But the people have to be hired for a job digitally. And exactly what you mentioned is that you should fight to keep your system, because you lose a lot of a mechanism to do some checks, a control mechanism. You lose it when you give away your hiring hall. So I hope when everything gets better and this new normal is getting to an end, that you guys, that you will be proud again and entering the hiring hall like it used to be, because it's very important, exactly as you mentioned.
Yeah, I feel like COVID has allowed digitalization and automation kind of sneak up on us, you know, because we're all scared to be physically close to other people, which before that's what you thrive as a union, right? The unionism. And now it's like, okay, I'm scared that to get close to somebody, and then you accepted digitalization, which before was like, okay, no, we need people to do the job, we need the hiring hall, we need everybody get together. But now it's being scared to live through a pandemic. But I feel like this topic's gonna be longer, so we're just gonna go into a break. We're going to present a short video about COVID too, and then we will be back and resume this.
Dockers, like many other essential workers, never stopped working through the pandemic. COVID-19 has made us a big impact on the working class, leaving us mentally exhausted by the uncertainty. We have worked through many challenges, but thanks to the collective action from strong unions, we can feel more protected coming to work compared to the beginning of the pandemic. Saying this, we have lots to do when it comes to the protection of workers on the workplace and the right to a safe environment. Because every worker themselves to come home safe. In solidarity, an injury to one is an injury to all.
Hi, I'm Nick LORIDAN. I'm a shop steward in the Port of Antwerp, and I wanted to talk about a few things that changed during the COVID crisis for us as shop stewards and dock workers in the port, and how there are certain measurements that were taken to keep everybody safe and to be sure that we stay healthy, which aren't as obvious as everybody might think. So yeah, you will follow me for a while now. Thanks. At the peak of the Corona crisis, it wasn't really easy to inform everybody and to keep informed ourselves as people working for the union, because we couldn't gather in large numbers anymore. So it was quite difficult to share knowledge and information with each other. So we had to use new technologies, and we had to grab a lot of new applications on the internet. We had to use SMS, we had to use social media groups. We were able to work and to keep informing the members, but it was a really difficult exercise, and we had to reinvent a lot of things in a new manner. At the moment, we know how to inform the members when there is a crisis situation, when we can't gather in person anymore. But it was really difficult in the beginning to find ways to keep everybody informed. So one thing that's gave some problems to people and to our dock workers was people who were doing a carpooling session, people who were carpooling together. By the COVID law which was created, they couldn't combine a car anymore. So everybody had to drive by themselves, and people who were driving together doing the carpooling, they had to search for alternative options. So that wasn't great news for people who hadn't have a car personally. So everybody had to think about it and be a little bit creative in how to get to work and to rethink the mobility ideas. Yeah, so as you can see behind me, this is the area where our dock workers can collect their personal protection equipment. And it wasn't that obvious at first, but to be sure that our dock workers are protected against rains and the elements, and to be sure that they can have a guarantee to have a social distance when they collect their personal protective equipment, we had to put a tent to protect them against the elements from the weather, because it isn't fun when you're having social distancing and when you're waiting to collect your gear that you're standing in the rain. So at one time we had to close down our public union building, which completely goes against our policy, because at the BTP, at our union, we want to like to give everybody the feeling that they're coming home and that it's one big family. So when we had to close down the building during the peak of COVID, it was quite terrible. And we had to reinvent the way how we have contact with our members. We had to start to work on an appointment schedule. So everybody had to make an appointment to be able to enter the union buildings, which was difficult in the beginning, but now for in the future, when we might have another problem in a peak of the COVID crisis, when there are too many people who are getting sick again, we know how we can meet up with the members, doing it on a scheduled base when they have to make appointments. It isn't the best option, but it is an option to keep working and to keep doing the union work as we are meant to do it. All right, so yeah, we're back again. So maybe to kickstart the discussion again, Viri, did you at your terminal, for an example, did they get a broader range of personal protection equipment? Some things like alcohol gels or disinfecting stuff for the people? I can imagine that they did so.
Yes, they did. So before they created a position. It was called COVID cleaner. This person will come and disinfect all areas. And we got provided with a mask and sanitary wipes, and like when you have to use a truck or equipment, you do have to clean it up on your work time just before you start your shift. Just clean it up and then, so that's a really good safety way to keep the environment clean and disinfected. Now, I don't believe, and don't quote me on that, I don't believe we have the COVID position anymore in my port. I don't think so. Well, I haven't really, we haven't had work in a very long time. We kind of fought for that position. And I believe now there's just the regular cleaner that just does the cleaning, that it has to have extra measurements I remember when it first started, they were making our first day do the COVID cleaning. And we're like, no, this is not acceptable. You can't have the first day. Well, the first day just sits there waiting for an accident to happen, you know? Let's just save some money and get that person to do the cleaning, the handles and stuff. And it was a good thing from our union that we pushed to create this position of to have a COVID cleaner, and then also give us the the equipment to do our part and sanitize all this.
The chlorine wipes and everything.
The
like
chlorine
that.
wipes yes. And now in the port that I'm working on, every room pretty much has some type of mask, just in case you forget yours. You just have a mask there, and
all right.
These are kind of the measurements that they're taking.
We had the same measurements, I think, but we did have a period where we had a great shortage for disinfecting shells and chlorine wipes. It was like gold. People were going crazy. Nobody had it. Everybody wanted to have it. We even had it with the face masks. Our trade union, the BTB, there was a real scarcity of face masks. They weren't available for anybody. And through our connections that we had for buying promotional materials such as this sweater, for example, we were able to buy a few types of masks in bulk with a logo on it. So we had to buy it because there weren't masks anywhere to provide the people. But I think it's the same with vaccines still in a few countries. How are things going with the vaccinations for you, Brian, at your port?
Well, a couple of things on that. First, back in April, what is it? October. So back in April, our union, at the time, vaccines weren't like they hadn't become available to everybody yet. Or maybe they had. I'm trying to think of this timeline in my head. But our union basically secured X amount of vaccines and started doing vaccination drives like at our union hall. That's cool. I think we've done 2 or 3 of those now. Anybody who wants a vaccine currently can literally just drive through. There's like a stadium where even to this day, you can drive through and go get vaccinated. Like, it's free. Anybody who wants a vaccine in the United States right now can get one. You just have to go sit in line for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. You get a shot, you come back for your second shot, whatever. So they're widely available. The thing I did want to bring up is Sam Levins, who's working with the ITF down in the Bay Area, has helped start a program for seafarers to get vaccinated when they come into ports in the Bay Area.
We had it in Belgium.
That's a really cool way to bridge the gap or make that connection between longshore and seafarers who will work side by side all the time. But, unless we're up lashing on a container ship, we probably don't ever interact. So it's just a cool scenario for people to get vaccinated who are out at sea for months and months and months. So I don't know absolutely. So
I know here in Canada, Peter LaHaye is organizing to get all the seafarers vaccinated because it was some concern, like with all these vaccine mandates, all the people on the docks are getting vaccinated. Sometimes you have to work with the seafarers who in their countries there's no vaccines available, and they can't leave the ship because of whatever regulations we have in place. So I know Peter LaHaye is working really hard to get all these seafarers vaccinated. I believe in some occasions they bring a nurse to the ship, to the vessel, and apply the doses there, or they have a permit to take them out to a hospital or a center where they have the vaccines, which is, I feel like a really good progress for the ITF. Now ITF is really pushing for push the international leaders, to get the vaccines for every worker and every person who is, willing to get the vaccination.
I thought we would have much more differences, but when I'm hearing to you, Viri and Brian, I think our countries are having a really similar approach. And I also think that the ITF is doing a really good job because also ITF is pushing here to do the same work for the seafarers to get a vaccination. So yeah, I can we can conclude that I'm a little bit happy and positively shocked that we are having the same approaches. I thought the differences would be bigger between Canada, the States, and Western Europe. But I'm very happy to hear about it because we couldn't emphasize enough. It's so important to get a vaccination. It stays a personal choice, of course. It's for everybody to choose it. But if you're looking at the broader picture and you want to help society, it's so important to get the vaccination. Yeah.
Our employers actually implemented an incentive program. So if you send in proof of vaccination, they send you a equivalent of a full day's pay, like a whole shift payment as an incentive for getting vaccinated. So some people money talks, and that's what gets them over the finish line. And hey, whatever gets people there.
Yeah, it's a good motivational one. Of course, it works. That's nice. I'm happy to hear it.
The real motivation I'd like to see is solidarity with, I don't know, the human species. That's why I got a shot. You know, I'm not somebody that goes out and gets flu vaccines. I've never been a medicine hospital doctor guy, but I heard there was a deadly pandemic and people were dying. And I think for me, if all I have to do is have something stuck in my arm, and that's a way I can be in solidarity with people, and you know, smart people are telling us that this is a way to mitigate like the mad dash on our healthcare system and to slow the spread. It's not a cure-all, but this is a way that we can actually help humanity contain this thing. Then hell yeah, stick it in my arm. Like, I don't know why that's a disconnect for some people, but it is. And I wonder if people are analyzing their motivations here. And I hope that their motivations are solidarity and community and, you know, your coworkers and your loved ones and your coworkers' loved ones, and on and on and on and on. That's why you get a vaccine. So go get the vaccine if you haven't yet.
I couldn't agree more. I completely agree with what you're saying, Brian.
Yes, I agree with you too, Brian. And, you know, one of the things that troubles me, like I'm by no means an anti-vax or anybody, but I'm very biased when people have their beliefs, religious beliefs, or why not from not getting the vaccine. I just don't like to see that segregation and that separation, you know, like I feel like we still have to be supportive of each other, or maybe trying to talk to them or listen to the side of the story, you know. I feel like we haven't had any outbreaks in our ports, like big outbreaks, like I believe. And you know, like I'm not for sure if I'm wrong on this. I think the only port that had a big outbreak and it closed actually was some place in China, some port in China, and that obviously affects the rest of the ports, like everywhere, and it creates like a backup, right? Like it's on work. We see it here in Canada that some days were really slow, and it's all because of other port that shut up, the shut up. And then also remember when the Evergreen happened, that affected everybody, affected you, affected us. So
it's still affecting us.
It's still affecting us.
You should look at our container yards.
I don't want to see an outbreak on all my ports. So, you know, like please be safe, take all the precautions, and like I said, I just don't want to see that segregation of dividing us.
Yeah, you know? I also hope the same, because I'm looking at, I know what you're saying. We have the same in Belgium. You have people who have, for medical or religious or whatever reasons that they want to use as the excuse to not get the vaccination. It's the personal choice. For me, it's very important that everybody gets it, but I also hope that we don't get divided in big camps, because no worker wins when we are divided. But I also hope that they follow Brian's counsel, because it was a really good counsel.
That's right.
as a working class to be solidary with each other and to try to pull the same sheet, as we say in Belgium. Because if divided we fall, and it would be terrible to see that we're falling as a group of workers. So I also hope that this separation of two groups in the long run, that we are able to convince the people who don't want to get vaccinated to get the vaccine, because it's I would hate it that there is even more division between the people that there already is. But it's not only in Europe that you have a rise of extremism, polarization. I think you guys also have a lot of division between people already. So we can miss this as a pain in the ass. So I also hope that we don't get divided a lot more and that we all got on the same page.
It's a really complicated time. I don't want to be, I don't know how to say this. It's a complicated time politically, especially in my country. You know, you're talking about Poland, which has taken like a pretty serious far right turn, and there is I don't want to talk about Donald Trump. I really don't. But I want to say there's an era that was inspired globally, and you see some of the polarity happening politically around the world. It's on every continent. I think it's really important to not try and think of the people who don't want to get vaccinated as all part of one crowd, because they're not. There are people that have religious reasons. There's people that have health reasons. Some people are just skeptics. There is a large camp in the United States that is really pushing back on this concept of medical freedom. And there's threats of mandates happening where people are, you know, potentially going to get fired or be forced into a situation where they have to resign over a vaccine or not. What bothers me about it is people who are on the fence, who might just be skeptical, might still be doing research, are getting dragged with this camp and with this crowd. And
they're falling for the fake news. I think that's what you're pointing at, right?
Yeah, there's that. It's like they're all being gravitated. They're being pulled together into some kind of thing. And it bothers me because half that argument in the United States has nothing to do with health. It has nothing to do with religious exemptions. It's pushback against liberalism and Joe Biden and the progressive movement. And it's just partisan politics crap. So it bothers me that really intelligent people are, whether they see it or not, are kind of being like lumped in with this camp. And it's becoming this sort of, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, because I try and give everybody their time to like explain their position. I try to have conversations with coworkers all the time, and it just seems like there's a gelatinous mob forming. And I think it's really important for people to keep pointing to scientists, pointing to data and information, keep pushing this solidarity message. As unionists, we have like an obligation to safety, to keeping our members safe. We are part of our community. It just feels like a very individualist kind of thing that's forming in the working class. And it's sad to me, because under the banner of freedom, mandates, health, vaccine skepticism, there's something else that's happening. And I think what's happening is what you're talking about. It's the division of the working class, to me, isn't that there's two groups against each other. It's that there's a group that is receding into very narrow self-interest and not thinking about the rest of the working class and the rest of the people in our communities and workplaces. And that bothers me. And that, to me, that's what the Trump era is people receding into very narrow, naked self-interest. And that, to me, is like the fundamental argument that the world is having around vaccinations right now. That's my soapbox. That's what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
You're analyzing it perfectly. I couldn't say it better. It's if you go to the States, if you go to Europe, I think if you go to whichever Western region in the world, I think Australia is the same at the moment. You have the same powers, the same players. In each country, you have your own Trump and your own kind of political party, like the one surrounding Trump. And yeah, it's the same game being played everywhere. So we should be very cautious in the long run, that we don't fall for this scheme. I completely agree. But maybe this might be something, unless you two guys have a few other important things to say, something to round up, because in this discussion, we're already having really long.
Yeah, I feel like this is a very
Yeah. So
wide topic
our
that we
format, our first one will be a very long one. So I completely agree with whatever you're saying, Brian. I hope that the people who are listening to this podcast and viewing it, that they reflect about it. They don't have to take our opinions as truth, but please reflect about it. And I would call you too, maybe, is there something one or two wants to end with, or a message that you want to convey to the people? Because if else our podcast is going to be too long.
yeah.
I love this
Well,
discussion. It's perfect for me. We should continue it the first time that we meet in real life again, but we should try to work towards an end, or it's gonna be too long.
Yeah, well, for me, thank you for everybody that has connected and listened to us. Thank you very much to Brian to be our first guest. I'm really excited about this project. And from what Nick said,
Oh, it's a cliffhanger
before,
It's a
this
cliffhanger.
podcast.
Yeah, Viri, you glitched a
If
little
you're
bit.
this podcast and our conversation didn't really reflected to you or the situation that you're having, please feel free to contact us and tell us about the situation of COVID in your union, in your country, because I know it's not the same everywhere else. So yeah, please, thank you for listening to us, and thank you, Brian, for being here.
And comment on us. As some very mentioned, comment, share your opinion. Brian, before we end, is there something that you want to share before we end? Before we get the 1 hour mark of our 20-minute concept?
Really quickly, I think our unions do need to know how we're going to interact with a scenario where unvaccinated people are potentially fired or something like that happens. We obviously have to step into that. That's what we do as unions, is protect workers. I don't know what the answer is. I'm guessing all of our union leadership needs to talk about it and understand what that looks like. At the same time, get vaccinated. That's all there is to it. Like, this is a deadly disease. Not to politicize my cousin's death, but my cousin died from COVID and was intubated a few months back, and that's really kind of shocked our family.
I'm sad to hear that. Sorry, Brian.
It's too easy to just get lumped into like, oh, I'm just back to work. It's not going to kill me. I'm the strongest human in the world. I got a great immune system. This isn't about your immune system. This is about my grandparents. Well, my grandparents have passed away. It's not about my grandparents. It's about your grandparents. It's about your neighbors. It's about your community. They don't have the world's strongest immune system. So please go get a vaccine. Help slow the spread of this thing. Help stop putting a strain on our healthcare systems. Get vaccinated. Thank you. Hell yeah.
Those are great words to end with, comrade. So yeah, I think we can round up. I hope we will have a follow-up discussion one of the coming days or months or weeks that we have before our next episode. And just like Viri did, Brian, I really want to thank you to join in. And I hope we will have you as a guest in the future. If you want to participate in this project and help us in the future, please feel free to do so. And it was really nice to see and hear you again, comrade.
Right on. Next time, I hope it's in person.
Yeah,
yes,
I hope the same.
Good to see you guys.
All right, it was really nice to see you guys, and we see each other soon in the future, I hope. And for all the people who are here, thank you very much for listening, and please feel free to hit up the comment sections. As long as everybody keeps it respectful, we have room for everybody's opinion over there. So keep safe, keep healthy, and let's see each other in person very soon.
Right
Bye,
on.
comrades.
See you guys.